If we think of an artwork like an object, it's like each piece of art has its own material buddy, and its form has a partner. For instance, if you write a song, and it's a vocal piece, who do you teach to sing it? A guy or a girl? A high voice or a low voice? It's kind of random. But hey, the song, the musical shape, already exists, right? It can be sung by someone, a human voice. As for the voice, whether it's a guy or a girl, well, we can pick either. Another example, a certain shape used to make a sculpture, whether you use marble or wood to make it. Whether we choose marble or wood, it seems like we can just pick whatever. Anyway, the shape is already in the sculptor's mind, and then I put the shape onto a certain material. I can choose to use bronze, or marble, or wood. It's totally up to me. People are used to thinking this way, and in doing so, they totally misunderstand the relationship between form and material. Then we say the beauty of a work comes from its form. But what about the material? It's just the carrier of this formal beauty. This understanding of the physical characteristics of a work is totally off. You know, I was just talking about this earlier. Normally, we don't really pay attention to rocks, but when you've got a big old rock right in front of you, you start thinking about it from a scientific angle. What kind of rock is it? What geological era does it come from? These are the things you start wondering about, and then you're like, how much does this thing weigh, anyway? It's like turning a few tons of rock into a math problem. We don't usually see rocks, right? So when do we actually see them? It's in art, and that's pretty interesting. So, an artist, they've got to work with the material. But is it just about putting the form onto the material and letting the material carry that form? Nope. It's about unlocking the potential of the material. If we're adding the form to the material, how should we phrase that? It's not about adding the form to the material, it's about revealing the material's true nature. Now, let's talk about what it means to reveal the material. In this respect, Heidegger's insights are really important. We just talked about this. So, Heidegger compared the difference between the work of a craftsman and a sculptor. For example, using marble to make a stone axe, to create a tool, a stone axe. He's also adding the form to the marble, right? And then you've got the sculptor using marble to make a statue, like a human figure statue, and he's also adding the form to the material. From the outside, these two activities look exactly the same, just working with the material and giving it a form, right? It seems like they're doing the same thing. But Heidegger pointed out, where's the real difference? He said, the mason consumes the stone, while the sculptor never consumes the stone. He lets the marble become marble, and presents it to us. When the craftsman finishes making his stone axe, the marble just vanishes. We're left with a practical, functional tool, you know? The marble kind of fades into the background. But when a sculptor uses marble to make a statue, that's when we really get to see the marble. So, Rodin, he's standing in front of the Venus de Milo, and he goes, check out this statue, you'll feel like her skin is warm, you can almost touch it. This Venus de Milo, all made of marble, the one with the broken arms, you know? It's like the crown jewel of the Louvre now. It's pretty awesome over there. And people from all over the world go to see it every year, right? So, Rodin, he's giving his take on this statue. He's like, when we're looking at the statue of the Venus goddess, that's when we really see the full beauty of marble. The thing about the lacquer craftsman and the painter is that they both use the same pigments, right? But here's the kicker, the craftsman uses up the pigments, while the painter makes them shine. That's the real difference. And remember how I mentioned consuming words earlier? It's like I wrote this essay, but a poet, they keep the words alive, you know? They let the words be words. That's the whole idea. It's about bringing out the essence of the material and letting the spirit of the object shine through. Let me tell you this classic story about someone asking Qi Baishi died to paint a picture for him. So, after a while, Qi Baishi finally agreed, and the guy was just waiting there. Qi Baishi wanted to keep it simple, you know? He was like, hold on. I don't want to make it too big. So, he grabbed a piece of rice paper, painted a fish, and then handed it over, saying, here you go. When the guy looked at it, he was blown away. He saw in the rice paper a pool of water. It was like a real pool of water. Qi Baishi didn't even paint the ripples and waves of the water, he just painted a fish, but it made you feel like it was a pool of water. In this regard, Confucius' saying is quite interesting. In the Analects, he talks about painting after the silk. Silk, in Western terms, would be called the material, right? For a painter, don't they have to use xian paper? In Chinese painting, this xian paper is the material, the silk. Okay, so then Confucius tells us, what is the foundation of painting? The silk, the material. Don't look at painting itself as something so extraordinary. It's just a form, right? But what is it really? It's always built upon the foundation of the silk. So, this painting sounds simple, like one always paints on rice paper, right? That Qi Baishi fish painting. The thing is, after he paints on the rice paper, the paper is no longer just a plain sheet of paper. When you look at it, it becomes a pool of water. So, there's this British guy in Shanghai who had heard about this famous Chinese painter, Wu Changshuo, died 1927, and thought his paintings would be worth a lot in the future. He wanted Wu Changshuo to paint something for him, and he offered £50 for it. Eventually, Wu Changshuo painted a picture for him, 5 broad beans on a piece of paper. When the British guy saw it, he was like, what? These beans are too expensive. I gave you £50, and you just painted 5 beans for me? The British guy was expecting something like a Western oil painting, you know, with the whole canvas covered in paint. He couldn't understand why Wu Changshuo only painted 5 beans and thought they were too expensive. But then, the Chinese friend explained, you don't get it. There's more to it than just 5 beans. This painting is full of meaning. The British guy was still confused, and the Chinese friend told him, you'll understand in the future. The friend suggested hanging the painting in the living room and taking a look at it during the hot summer. So, the British guy did just that. When he looked at the painting on the wall during the scorching summer, he felt a cool breeze. That's when he realized the true value of the painting. That's what opening up the material means. There's more to it than meets the eye. If we break down this piece, we can see 4 main things. First off, every work of art is basically an object. Like a sculpture is obviously an object, and in Western painting, the canvas and the paint on it make up an object. Architecture is also an object, and music needs instruments or someone's singing voice. So, all art has a physical form. Also, every work has its own formal side. For example, a piece of music might be structured as a rondo, variation, or sonata. In painting, the style of brushwork, like meticulous or freehand, makes a big formal difference. And in literature, like poetry and novels, the formal aspect includes specific rules and rhyme schemes, like those found in classical Chinese poetry. Architecture, of course, is like this. For example, students in the architecture department at Tongji University must study the configuration of buildings. In addition to the mechanical principles that need to be applied, there is also the requirement to create the building as an artistic work, which involves a sense of formal beauty. Thus, all works, especially artistic works, typically have an aspect of form. The third aspect also includes more or less realistic content. For example, what is the realistic content of a piece of architectural work? It is always built for a certain practical purpose. The Mao Zedong Memorial Hall, for instance, is a politically significant memorial building, which reflects its realistic content. Our residential buildings, if they are built very well, can be considered works of art. However, they always serve a practical purpose, providing housing or something else. In short, whether it's architecture, sculpture, painting, music, or literature, to a certain extent, they all incorporate real-life content, except for modernist works of art. Now, some avant-garde paintings, you can't say that they express any real content. Let's not discuss these for now. Throughout the long history of art, a large number of works of art have accumulated, all of which have a real-life content, and this is the third aspect. The fourth aspect refers to what this work is always trying to convey. This message always revolves around a central theme. Thus, conceptual themes can be identified. We can discuss the existence of an artwork from the perspective of these four compositional elements. From our previous discussion, we reached a very important conclusion: having all four basic elements does not necessarily make it a work of art. The existence of an artwork is not simply the sum of these four aspects. Therefore, the core issue of the field of art philosophy is to discuss the existence of the artwork itself. Only when this matter is discussed clearly can we then talk about the creation of artworks, the appreciation of artworks, and similar topics. So in the last class, we covered 2 sessions, which were the 2 sessions in the second lecture. The first session was a brief review of the 4 elements of the existence of a work and the fact that the existence of a work does not equal the sum of these 4 elements. In the second session, we discussed the physical characteristics of a work, how we must see each work as an object, and this object has its physical aspect. Is this physical aspect of the work merely a carrier of form? For example, is marble, the material used to create a statue, merely a carrier of the aesthetic form of the statue? If the physical characteristics of a work are only confirmed as carriers, then we are very far from the discussion of works of art. We discussed a very important matter last time: what does a work of art show us? It is not about looking at a certain entity and wondering what kind of entity it is or what it looks like. Let's discuss this pair of peasant shoes painted by Van Gogh. This painting of the peasant shoes, is it just showing us an entity called peasant shoes, and presenting what kind of thing these shoes are? What do they look like? That is not the purpose of the painting. Van Gogh's painting is, of course, a still life. Why depict this still life? Is it to help us see what the shoes are like? We could have a craftsman vividly paint that pair of shoes for us. The shoes consist of a sole and an upper, connected by the shoe laces between them. This is the structure, right? If we view artworks in this way, it seems that the work is merely showing us the entity itself. We talked about an important concept called context, borrowing the English word context. This includes a root word, text, and when text is combined with the prefix con, it becomes context or setting. So, we talked about something really important, especially for those into philosophy. There's this branch in philosophy called hermeneutics. In Europe, hermeneutics has its roots in interpreting biblical texts, kind of like how we study the classics in China. It's all about digging into these classic texts and figuring out what they really mean, and it definitely involves a lot of interpretation. Where does the meaning of a text come from? Does it just pop out when you read it? If we think that the meaning of a text is already there, just waiting for us to find it, well, that's a pretty simple way of looking at it. The truth is, the meaning of a text can only be understood within its context. So, let me give you a simple example. Imagine I'm teaching English and I want everyone to learn 2 words using pictures. I draw a picture of a PLA soldier with the word man underneath, and another picture of a nurse with the word woman underneath, and then I teach everyone these 2 words. Using this picture word association method, this action, to teach text, everyone accepts this text and understands its meaning, right? In this case, no student would raise his hand and ask if this means that all men in the world are PLA soldiers and all women are nurses. That just wouldn't happen. Why not? It's because when we all walk into the classroom, it's pretty obvious what we're all there for, right? We're in an English language teaching classroom. This is the context, and within this context, I used 2 pictures to teach everyone 2 words, and the meaning was understood without any confusion. This is super important. We always communicate within a certain context. Without this shared, obvious context, our communication wouldn't flow smoothly. If I say something and you don't have the context, the communication is blocked. The exchange of the meaning of the text relies on us being in a shared context. So, what does this all mean? It tells us what an artwork presents to us. It shows us what's always there, making communication and understanding possible in that field of existence. We're already in this field of existence, but none of us really talk about it, except for one group of people, the artists. Artists create works to present to us our field of existence, allowing us to see it. This will give us a fundamentally important understanding of the existence of an artwork. From this understanding, we will be able to discuss the 4 elements of the existence of an artwork and their interrelationships. But figuring out how to present the field of existence is not an easy task, which is why it requires specialized methods, and art is one of those methods. Artistic creation first confronts the material. This immediately brings to mind Aristotle and his theory of the 4 causes. Ultimately, the 4 causes can be summarized into 2, one is the formal cause, and the other is the material cause. So, what is the relationship between form and material? Aristotle tells us that, for example, a sculptor who wants to create a sculpture must start with the material, meaning the material cause is essential. Then, he needs to apply the form he has already conceived in his mind to the material. This is what we call the combination of form and material. The way we understand creating art can also be applied to all craftsmen, right? Like when a stonemason shapes stone into an axe, they're also combining form and material. But can we really call that axe an artwork? When we look at the axe, we know it's a useful tool, and that's all we see it as. Unless we use a really broad definition of artwork, we can't call it that. Now, let's talk about a beautifully crafted Zisha teapot. You might call it a craft, right? In a broad sense, it's considered a craft. It's well made, super fancy, and worth collecting and enjoyment. But still, we can't call it an artwork. Why not? We really need to think about this fundamental question. Unless you don't want to differentiate between art and non-art, or unless you've missed the essence of art and its fundamental goal. Unless you believe that artworks are merely meant to satisfy our aesthetic tastes, in other words, art is not one of the highest forms of human spiritual activity, nor does it have anything to do with truth. If we accept that art has never been just about that, then we would agree that at the most important moments in human life, art shows us the truth of an era. Art has inspired us to move towards the future, just like religion and philosophy have done. So, this line of thinking is super important, let's talk about it.